creator. All of these things point to what? That America was founded as a great moral enterprise. Look at the three rights that they talk about. These rights, including life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Life, the foundational right given to you by God that cannot be denied. Yet we do in this country. Liberty. I know there's a big movement, particularly on a lot of college campuses now, about liberty. We need to be very, very careful with what liberty really means, because there are those who will distort the true meaning of liberty as our founders understood it. Liberty is not the freedom to do whatever you want to do. Yes, it's freedom from government telling you how to live your life or what to do. But it's deeper than that. How do I know that? The next word of the Declaration. Pursuit of happiness. Next words. Life and liberty for what? To pursue happiness. As you know, if you read Locke and some of the other philosophers of the time, the general, I think it was in the Virginia Constitution, it was life, liberty, and property. But they said, no, that was insufficient. Property doesn't quite grasp what the real purpose of America is, why we are declaring our independence. And so they put the term in there, happiness. Now, you think about it. Life, pretty big, important right. Liberty follows, right? You can't have liberty without life, so you put life first. Liberty is clear. You have to have the freedom to be able to pursue, so government doesn't constrain you and force you to do things against your will, so you can be free to do what? Happiness. Today, what is the definition of happiness? Enjoyment, pleasure, contentment, right? If you were to define happiness, that's pretty much what you'd say. It's not what our founders would say. Our founders understood happiness to be something different. If you go back and look up the first Webster's dictionary, you will find the dictionary definition of happiness includes this basic principle. True happiness comes from doing what God calls you to do. Doing what you ought to do will result in true happiness. Oh, it may not result in immediate pleasure, but our founders understood that the freedom was to pursue what you ought to do, not what you want to do. And in so doing, you build a great society of virtuous people with limited government and the unlimited potential of the American public, building a great and prosperous society from the bottom up, and that's exactly what happened. In 235 years, life expectancy has more than doubled. Went from an agrarian to an industrial to a technology society. Why? Because government was limited and we believed in you. That, ladies and gentlemen, more than any other issue, is what's at stake in this election. If Barack Obama is reelected, I fear that this great noble experiment will be on its way to a close. Today, about 50% of Americans pay income taxes, and roughly a little less than 50% receive some sort of government benefit. When Obamacare is implemented, ultimately 100% of people in America will be dependent upon the federal government for their benefits. And when that happens, as your friends in the UK who are here will tell you, Maggie Thatcher, as tough as she was, as reform-minded as she never was able. In fact, she campaigned that she wouldn't touch the British healthcare system. It was a sacred cow that you cannot touch. As she said in her waning days after Reagan, when she was compared to Reagan, she said she was never able to accomplish what Ronald Reagan accomplished in this country. And she said the reason, the British national healthcare system. Once people are addicted and dependent, it is very, very hard to take that away. We have to win this election because I believe the future of the republic is at stake. And so that's why I decided to get out and run for president. And I decided to go out and tell people exactly what I just told you. Here's why. And the amazing thing is, in spite of being outspent, I don't know how many multiples to one, in spite of getting absolutely no press coverage and being out there on the edge of these debates, and they throw me a question every now and then about abortion or gay rights or something like that, to reinforce the stereotype that he's just sort of a candidate, likes to talk about these things. In spite of that, when we went around the country and we talked about these core principles and core values, talked about this election has to be about who we are. Problems in this country, yes, they're economic, but they're much more foundational than that. They go to the core of who we are. They go to the core of the family structure in America. And so we went out and talked about those things. And amazingly, people came. And we ended up winning Iowa and 11 other states. And I would just share with you that those of you who are out there on college campuses, and you think it's hopeless on so many campuses, when I went out and talked about the basic principles of who we are, go back to the Declaration. Ask them whether they agree with that. People say we're so divided. Nah, we're not as divided as you think. We've just forgotten a lot. So many have just not been re-anchored. You bring them back and re-anchor them to something we can start at as a starting point for what America is about, then walk them forward. What does that mean? What is this whole idea of God-given rights and fundamental rights really mean? Where do those rights come from? And when the government comes in and says, we're going to give you a right, you see what happens. They can tell you how to exercise those rights. It's exactly what they're doing in the HHS regs and so many other things that they are now imposing their will on people against their fundamental freedoms. I'm encouraged. I am greatly encouraged by what I saw across America. There is a wellspring of people who see what this time in America is about. And they're anxious and willing, and they are stepping forward. I have no doubt, whether it's this election or whether it's the next one or the ones in the future, that the American DNA, and I think our DNA is different. The vast majority of people who came to this country came here because they wanted those things that I talked about. Your ancestors, by and large, came here because they wanted those things. It's in your DNA. They didn't stay behind. I would encourage you to be happy warriors, to go out and talk about the greatness of our country, to remind people who we are and what we're about and how we transform this world. And that if we are willing to go back to the pre-revolutionary days of being servants, subjects of the king, servants to the government, which is exactly what we were prior to 1776. And we're exactly where we're headed if we don't do something now.